U.S. President Donald Trump has revealed plans to slap tariffs on imports from Mexico, Canada, and the country the U.S. has the biggest trade deficit with, China. But Beijing isn't blinking. At a news conference on Wednesday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said there are no winners in trade or tariff wars. Her remarks come a day after Trump said his administration is discussing an additional 10% tariff on imports from China starting February 1st. Trump said he'll impose the extra levy because China is sending fentanyl to the country via Mexico and Canada. Overdoses from the painkiller drug are a serious social problem in the U.S.
China wants to build bilateral relations with the U.S. in a stable, healthy, and sustainable manner by maintaining communication and appropriately managing differences.
Trump says Beijing has done little to stop the production and export of materials used to produce fentanyl.
We're talking about a tariff of 10% on China based on the fact that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada.
How soon on those tariffs?
Probably February 1st is the date we're looking at.
Behind Trump's tariff threat is the U.S. trade deficit. This graph, based on data from the Japan External Trade Organization, or JETRO, shows the countries with which the U.S. had the biggest deficits as of 2023. For China, the figure stood at about $279 billion. Trump's tariffs on Chinese imports during his first term in office were left in place by his successor, President Joe Biden. To get around them, Beijing exported to the U.S. via countries like Mexico instead. And we can see from the graph how the U.S. trade deficit with Mexico has risen. And then there is another country that has taken a similar course, Vietnam. According to JETRO, the deficit with Vietnam in 2023 stood at about $105 billion, the third largest of any country with the U.S. We are now joined by NHK World's Nguyen in Hanoi to learn more. So Thuy, how do you think Vietnam will respond to the new administration as the third largest U.S. trade deficit partner?
Well, I think the Vietnamese government is concerned that the country may become the next target of tariffs. In the first Trump administration, many corporations tried to disperse their bases outside of China to avoid the impact of tougher tariffs. That hugely benefited Vietnam, but it's been a double-edged sword. Vietnam's trade surplus with the U.S. has soared, more than doubling to $83 billion between 2016 and 2023. Because of this, Vietnam is seen as taking a conciliatory approach toward Trump, hoping to keep under the radar to maintain seamless trade. Last year, a Vietnamese real estate company disclosed it had concluded a deal with the Trump Organization to develop a luxury resort and golf course, but it is unclear how effective this strategy will be.
So then, how do you see the new administration impacting diplomacy and national security?
Vietnam is optimistic on those fronts. Its territorial disputes with Beijing in the South China Sea are incentive for the U.S. to keep strengthening relations with Vietnam to keep China in check. The first Trump administration strengthened its confrontational stance against China and dispatched warships to the South China Sea to signal its support for freedom of navigation. Vietnam has welcomed such moves, but wants to avoid excessively provoking China, as Trump's Southeast Asia priority is considered not so high. Last week, Vietnam's top leader To Lâm spoke by phone with Chinese President Xi Jinping, inviting him to visit. Their conversation, which was held shortly before the launch of the new Trump administration, suggests that Vietnam wants to stabilize relations with China. Amid rising tensions between the U.S. and China, Vietnam is looking to strike a balance during the next 4 years.